Hey, this is my video response to the idea of Jim Crow and apartheid, comparing and contrasting. So, both Jim Crow, which was basically separate but equal legislation here in America, and apartheid, which was actually a constitutional law in South Africa, both sought to segregate black people from white people and to depress their liberties and rights. They were not given the same rights and were treated as second-class citizens. One big difference is that here in America, black people made up a minority of about 20%, and whereas in South Africa during the beginning of apartheid, it was the opposite. Black people were made up about 80% of the population. During apartheid, mixed races were also segregated from the white class. The white people took over South Africa and basically pushed the African population into segregated areas to actually move them out of what they would call proper South Africa so that they could be considered the majority. And whereas in America, Africans were brought here as slaves against their will, and so they never actually had rights. They had no rights when they came here at all. So Jim Crow was actually, in some ways, it was an improvement over what there was before, but it just justified treating people non-equally. And so during civil rights, during Jim Crow, black people were, by their position of not having rights and not being able to get good jobs, they had no choice but to live in poorer neighborhoods or black neighborhoods. Also, there was a fear of violence. There was actually violence on both sides in America and in apartheid. And there was violence by the people who were trying to get civil rights. There might have been more. I feel like there was more violence in apartheid by the resistance. And Nelson Mandela actually was an advocate of violence initially. He was angry. He felt like what was happening was wrong, which of course most of us would agree with. But after he was imprisoned, he found a way to be happy and accept not the fact that he wanted to stay depressed, I mean like sociologically depressed, but that he was not willing to fight violence with violence. And so after that he stood for peace and civil disobedience, just like Martin Luther King. And he was eventually made president after apartheid was overcome, which is a great story, which I love. So both in America and in South Africa, protests by both civil rights groups were met with resistance by the government, by banning of protests and by imprisonment of protesters. And of course there was violence on both sides in that. Both countries had affirmative action to try to even the playing field after the segregation was removed from society. However, in South Africa, it was a job to give, it was like more of a big deal to give equal rights to 80% of the population. That was like a lot of people to make up to. And as a result of this desegregation, the separate but equal idea, which of course wasn't true at all, there was no such equality, both blacks in America and in South Africa are still dealing with the remnants of economic disparity. But progress is being made, thankfully, and hopefully it will continue. And thank you for watching.